Artificer Creation.
Hi folks, this is Bart Bishots from Bartificer Creations, guest hosting the NocillaCast Apple podcast hosted at podfeet.com, a technology geek podcast with an ever so slight Apple bias, and for today only, a more than slight Irish accent. Today is Sunday, April 20th, 2025. This is show number 1041. And I want to start by wishing Alison and Steve a very happy birthday while they are enjoying their travels around Japan. I will wish a happy Easter to all Christian Nocilla castaways, happy chocolate day to just all, and vrolijk Pasen to my fellow Dutch speakers. We have a jam-packed show. In fact, it's so jam-packed, I wrote more content than I'm going to fit. So if you're reading along in the blog post, you know I've written a really fun blog post about words, but no room for today, so I'm going to gift that to Alison for use in either next week's show or maybe the week after, because I've also gifted some more content from Alistair and from Steve to Alison for her show, so she's going to have a really easy time next week for her first show back. Ooh, she's going to be so out of practice after all these weeks traveling around Japan. Anyway, she has lots of content to keep her company. Before we dive into the traditional content, Alison wanted me to remind you that she has a coupon code for the Mackstock conference in July outside of Chicago. Alison loves this conference, as if you're a listener, you kind of know. She'd love to see you there. The show is July 11th to the 13th in Woodstock, Illinois. If you want to save $50, use Alison's coupon code PODFEET50. You'll get $50 off the conference fee, and Alison gets $25 for sending you their way, which is kind of cool. So basically, head over to Mackstock Conference. That's such a URL. Mackstockconferenceandexpo.com to join in the fun.
Our good friend Chris Ashley is the master of barbecue and grilling and making briskets in particular. So we had to stop by the Brisk It booth to learn about a new device that's all AI powered to make apparently perfect brisket. I'm here with Christopher Wang to tell us about it.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, so Brisket was all about using AI, smart home technology, and automation to deliver the most hands-free and simple and stress-free grilling experience possible. The whole idea is that the entire process, from the recipe generation to the preparation to the cook to even the post-cook, can be done as close to one click as possible.
I see. So this is a smoker, correct?
It is a wood pellet grill, smoke smoke as low as 165 and go up to 500 degrees for high heat grilling.
Okay, you can do the whole thing. So talk to us about the interface here, and there will be people who are only listening, so describe as much as possible if you would.
Okay, great. So what you see here is a representation of the mobile app that's available at the App Store and iOS store as well. And what this allows you to do, as very simple basics, it allows you to control, monitor your grill from anywhere using your mobile app. But of course, what really sets us apart is our AI, generative AI software. So the whole idea is that you can open up Vera, which is our generative AI, and you can ask anything, say anything, and even photograph anything. And in free-form input, it'll then generate the recipe based on whatever you tell it.
So I could say, make me some Brussels sprouts?
Exactly. That's a very simple one, but you can even go as complicated as, make me some Brussels sprouts, make sure I only have this amount of time, I have this many people. One person is allergic to that, and I also want to combine it with a steak. Cook all of that for me in 20 minutes. And it'll take all those parameters in free-form input, whether through voice or text. You can even take a photo of something, and then it'll then generate a recipe.
That's crazy. That sounds really cool. So let's go to the next step now.
Okay, so let's say that I want to make these are just pre-made, but I want to make a brisket with tinfoil wrap. So I can press that, and then like a true generative AI, it is then using the data inputs as well as our database and language model to then generate a recipe and a cooking program that will correspond with the parameters that you provided. So as you can see, this has been generated. This recipe did not exist just a few seconds ago.
So it says trim the brisket, tells you what to trim, tells you the ingredients you need and to season it, what to season it with. and now he's going to start talking about smoking at 225.
Yes. So just like any real chef, if you don't like something, you can modify it. Make it spicier, make it faster, make it larger, or add some new ingredients to it.
We didn't tell it how big the brisket was. How did it know how long to cook it?
Well, then it will then use, that's the great thing about just like any AI, the more information you give, the more specific it will be. But the less information you give, it'll be more general. But it's still, general is not necessarily bad, because it may just be what's the best recommendation.
Okay, so with smoking a brisket, there's a lot of activity. You do this for a while, and then you take it out, and you flip it over, and you spread this on it, and you shove it back in. I have watched people make briskets, and it's a lot of steps. So I notice up here, it is telling us, for example, smoke at 225, and it tells us for 8 hours, but then it tells us to wrap it in tinfoil after that, correct?
Exactly, and you can see here it's giving you, first off, it'll let you know when to wrap it. It'll give you 15 minutes to wrap it, and if you do it fast, you can let it know and it'll proceed. But the great thing is, let's send this recipe to the grill. The great thing is that we want to be true dynamic automation, just like a Tesla self-driving car. So what does that mean? Yes, it will follow steps, it will control the temperature, it'll let you know when to do something like wrap in or spritz in it. But what if you don't do it, right? What if you're cooking overnight, you're fast asleep, or you're talking to your friends, or maybe you're out with your kids, with your family. So it will let you know when to wrap it. But if you don't wrap it, it'll detect, hey, no one wrapped this brisket, so I will adapt to understand that this brisket has not been wrapped.
How does it know I didn't wrap it?
It'll know that no inputs, no interaction was done with the grill.
Okay, it doesn't know that, or it knows that I didn't take it out.
Exactly, and speaking of taking it out, when the food's done cooking, let's say you did it overnight and cook a little bit faster than you expected. You cooked at, maybe finished cooking at 6 a.m. Maybe you're like me, I'm not so much an early riser, so I slept through my alarms, I didn't wake up. Well, it'll detect, hey, no one came to come get this brisket, and this brisket's done cooking. So I'm going to reduce the temperature, make sure it doesn't overcook, so when I do wake up at, say, let's be a little bit generous, 8 a.m., then I can still
Sure you will.
Yeah, exactly, I can still come back to a fully not overcooked, not overdone brisket.
I noticed that the recipe, what we're seeing on this simulation of the app here, we see 225 degrees, it's got a bunch of information going on, and that's now moved over to the brisket itself, correct? Exactly. We can see it on a display here.
This is paired. The data, of course, is simulated because we cannot just smoke up the convention, but yes, this is representative of a real cook.
Okay, so can you show us the inside? What does this look like? Where do you put in the pellets and such?
Yes, so the pellets do go in here. It's a 22-pound hopper. And you can see that we have a folded shelf with the laser cut accents, high temp matte back plane. And yeah, it's you can see a high resolution digital screen. And of course, this is 580 square inches of cooking space. And it can go up to 500 degrees or as low as 165.
Now, I think I heard you telling somebody that you have different sized briskets.
Exactly. So this one here is probably the most popular size. It's the Origin 580, or it's a variant of Origin 580. This has been, a variant of this has been on the market since 2022. But what we're actually really excited about unveiling today is, if you can see the back there, it's called a Zelos model, which is a smaller, more entry level, and it's at the $399 price point. Will be coming out later this year. And the great thing about it is, our tagline is everyone's smart grill, because we really want everyone, no matter what their budget is, what their skill level, their time availability is, to be able to cook great home cooked barbecue. So that one, in terms of software, is not defeatured in a single slightest compared to this one here.
It's not defeatured, meaning it has all the same features.
Same AI technology, no artificial limitations over our more.
I really hear $399. That is something people can afford.
Exactly. There is always the...
Don't raise the price because I said that.
Yeah. No. Yeah, there's always a pattern of, when you have a very new technology, very advanced technology, you want to charge a premium for it. But we actually take this different approach where we want to be accessible, right? Everyone's smart grill. We really believe that mantra.
I can't see that one over this one. Is that one smaller over there?
It is smaller. It's 450 square inches versus this one, which is 580. But 450 inches is still enough to fit a whole packer brisket. Oh,
okay. How about a turkey? How big of a turkey could you fit in there?
I think you could fit most turkeys. Maybe if a turkey went to the gym pretty hard, might be a tight squeeze.
Or porked out.
Yeah, exactly. But it'll fit the vast majority of cooking use cases.
This is really, really interesting. So it's called Brisk It, two
Correct.
words. And what's the website?
brisketgrills.com, as well as most of these grills will be available on homedepot.com, lowes.com, as well as many other big box retailers.
Okay, that's genius. That's where you definitely want to be, because that's where we're going to walk by and pick out the next one. Thank you very much, Christopher. This is really, really cool.
Thank you for coming. My pleasure.
For over 7 years, my working from home solution was to use the Citrix Workspace app on my Mac to remotely connect to a Windows 10 laptop that remained on my desk in the office. With the introduction of Windows 11 into the company in 2024, this was no longer allowed, and I needed to fit a new Lenovo ThinkPad into my home setup. It has been a real challenge working out how to introduce the ThinkPad when needed and get it out of the way when not. I also wanted to use my studio display with the ThinkPad. My previous semi-permanent setup for my MacBook Pro simply did not allow room for an extra laptop. I decided that I could do without having the MacBook Pro lid open. The extra screen was useful, but having the laptop open on the desk takes considerable space. It could be used in clamshell mode. I just needed to figure out where to put it. The first thing that came to mind was the 12 South Book Arc. I had seen these in reviews some years previously. I looked around for any alternatives and none looked right for me. However, no local retailers were stocking the Book Arc anymore, not even Apple. I did find, however, that Apple stocks the newer Book Arc Flex. It looked pretty clever, and local retailers carried it, including Apple, so I bought one. I will soon be selling it. The Book Arc Flex comprises 2 sturdy metal tubes that are curved. Imagine a parenthesis character lying open side down and you have the approximate shape. These are terminated at each end with grippy feet. The 2 arcs are then joined by 2 flexible but sturdy straps that form a cradle between the tubes. Placing the feet on the desk, you lower the edge of your closed laptop into the cradle, and the weight causes the 2 tubes to come together and grip the laptop with rubber bumpers. It is elegant in its simplicity. What is not elegant is when I, twice, knocked over the laptop, causing minor mayhem on the area of the desk with cables straining, items flying, and laptop crashing. What is not mentioned at all in the listing on Apple's site is that it is unsuited for 16-inch laptops. Only at the bottom of a long product page on 12 South's own website does this sentence appear in an FAQ, which you have to expand to read. Book Arc Flex holds most laptops up to a 14-inch screen and under 1 inch thick, perfectly sturdy. After the second incident, I decided I needed to revisit my solution. I once again determined that the Book Arc, not the Book Arc Flex, was what I wanted. I confirmed no local retailers carried it and then ordered it directly from 12 South. At the same time, I ordered the Curve Riser, reviewed separately, and was shocked at the shipping cost being more than the cost of the 2 items. Oh well. The Book Arc is basically a flat strip of aluminium approximately 4mm thick, bent into an arc. The dimension that will matter most is the width, which is 9.14 centimeters. Your laptop will be the defining size in depth as well as height. It has soft, grippy silicone feet attached to each end and a broad slot through the middle. It comes with a selection of silicone inserts for the slot, which conform to different models of laptop. Inserts are included by default for all current MacBook Pro models and 1 model of MacBook Air, but you can add an extra insert for other MacBook Air models for free when ordering directly from 12 South. After removing the insert installed in the box and replacing it with the correct one for my 16-inch MacBook Pro, I cautiously slotted my laptop in. It fits snugly, though with enough play that it doesn't need to be forced at all. That play does allow some amount of wobble, but there's no way it's falling out of the Book Arc unless I'm particularly rough with it. The Book Arc Flex allowed the tiniest of knocks to topple it. I have since downsized to a 14-inch MacBook Pro and it fits a little more snugly in its insert. The one minor niggle I have is when I insert or remove an SD card or USB cable on the near end of the laptop. It is prone to slide a little in the slot, but not so much that it is in danger of falling out. This is easily countered by holding the top of the laptop and, frankly, is a much better problem to have than the toppling risk. I'm happy with the Book Arc, which vindicates my initial research. You can order in either silver or space grey directly from 12 South for $19.99. Other retailers may stock it, just not in New Zealand. You can order the Bookmark Flex in black, white or chrome directly from 12 South for $39.99. I'm not sure if I'd trust it even for a 14-inch MacBook Pro, but they claim it will be sturdy. Your mileage may vary.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And I just want to second Alistair's recommendation for the Bookmark because I use one in my bedroom all the time. Basically, the desk in my bedroom it's a nice desk, but it's not the world's biggest desk. So the difference in the footprint of my MacBook Pro sitting flat open versus my MacBook Pro in clamshell mode is really significant to me on that desk. So I have a Bookmark right next to my studio display there, which keeps the MacBook Pro nice and vertical, plugged into power, etc., etc. And what was really cool was that I actually bought the thing when I had a little MacBook Air. And then when I bought the MacBook Pro, all I had to do was replace the little rubber insert and hey presto, now it perfectly holds my MacBook Pro. Alistair is also going to be back later in the show with another review for another amazing product from 12 South. So more from Alistair and a little bit more from me later. I've been an advocate of the follow the money philosophy for a very long time now, probably more than a decade, because I think that your data, and hence your privacy, are valuable, so you need to choose carefully who you entrust them to, and the best way to figure out who is and isn't worthy of that trust is to understand how they pay their bills. Once you understand how an app or service keeps the lights on, you'll understand their incentives. And then you need to choose apps and services from organizations whose incentives align with yours. So when I first started philosophizing about this, I broke the big complex world of apps and services down into 5 archetypes, 5 sort of, things that cover most, but not quite all, apps. Commercial, which is basically where you pay for stuff, nice and straightforward. The opposite of that is genuinely free, so charitable foundations founding free apps and services like Wikipedia, and of course the entire open source ecosystem. Then you start to get to the grey bits between those two extremes. Probably the simplest to understand is freemium. There are for-profit apps that use basic free versions as a loss leader for their high-end apps and services, and I would say Dropbox is an excellent example of an app that uses this business model to great effect. A rather scary one really is Free for Now. So these are apps and services from for-profit companies that run losses year after year after year because they want to grow so they can cash in later somehow. Their defining feature is that they're unsustainable. So something will need to change in the future, or they'll vanish. WhatsApp is a perfect example. They had no viable business model, spent money hand over fist to grow their user base in the hope of pivoting later. That hope to pivot didn't quite work out, and they ended up selling to Meta. They had great privacy terms. All of those evaporated once WhatsApp became part of the Meta empire. And then the last one is the one that I coined a new word for, freepy. Free in exchange for your personal information. This is your Googles, your Metas, your X's, etc. You don't pay with money, but you do pay. You pay with your privacy. And you do that, if you choose to do that knowingly and deliberately, no bother, cool. But most users are effectively tricked into thinking they're getting something for nothing, which is why I find freepy distasteful, and I personally choose to avoid it whenever I can. Anyway, if we step back and we look at the incentives here, well, commercial is really easy to understand. I pay a company to provide me a service that I want, and their incentive is to keep me, the customer, happy. So our incentives are perfectly aligned. I want something, they're offering it, and they're incentivized to keep me as happy as I can, so I keep paying the bills. This is why I'm an Apple customer, because I like what Apple have on offer. They do great hardware, they present it in a way that protects my privacy. So I am delighted to give them their money, and it's their job to keep me happy, so I keep giving them my money. Charitable foundations, so truly free stuff. the question here is, what are the aims of the charity? If it's a charity that's trying to do something you find abhorrent, then obviously your aims don't align. But if it's an organization whose aims are compatible with yours, then hey presto, the incentives align, which is why I am a very happy Wikipedia user and a donor. So I'm one of the people keeping the lights on at Wikipedia. I also don't have any problem with freemium apps because they have a business model. They are sustainable. So I spent years as a free Dropbox user, but now that I want a few fancier features, I am perfectly happy to pay them for a pro membership. And it just, it works. Incentives are aligned. I'm the customer. Everything's grand. The free for nows are also a really easy call for me. I just avoid them like the plague because they'll either fail or they'll pivot. Maybe to freemium or commercial if you're lucky, but past experience has taught me that most free for now apps pivot to becoming freebie. Either they monetize your privacy or they sell to someone who monetizes your privacy. But either way, when something is free, it's very hard to start charging for it. And the end result is that the companies find they can't, and so, or at least not with money. So then they have to start doing it with data and privacy. And it seems pretty inevitable if past is anything like Prologue, that free for now is going to end in tears, so I just don't. Now, what I've really struggled to avoid is freebie. Simple fact is, I use WhatsApp because I know I'm paying for it with my privacy, but, well, when I weigh it up, it's an acceptable exchange for contact with my family. It wasn't until the pandemic that I realised quite how much I did want that exchange, and I did. I still don't feel happy about it, but it is still the right trade-off. I re-examine it from time to time, and it's like, nope, I still want to do this. I used to use Twitter, but, I tolerated it while it was Twitter. And now that it's gone to you-know-what and a you-know-what cart, I'm done. So I left X. I left my account open so no one could squat my username, but I'm gone. So all in all, I've actually done a pretty good job of moving my digital life away from freebie, away from free for now, towards truly free commercial and freemium. So I use Apple and Linux for my computing devices and OSs. I use a corporate Office 365 subscription for email, contacts, calendar, lots of my messaging through Teams. Most of my cloud storage through OneDrive, and all of those boring Office apps, your Excels, your PowerPoints. Sorry, Alison, I do actually use PowerPoint. But I use Excel, so forgive me, and Word. I also pay for a family plan for managing my secrets in 1Password. Like I already mentioned, I pay for Dropbox. That's commercial, freemium. I am a very heavy Signal user. I use it for as much of my private messaging as I can, and a donor, by the by. So I like to pay for my free stuff, any weird I am. I also run my own Mastodon server for my most valuable social media posts. So for Bartificer Creations, I have social.bartificer.ie is my own Mastodon server. And I have a paid membership at glass.photo for my photography. So not doing too bad here. But, for a very, 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 very long time, I was very reluctantly still using Google Search. Every time I tried to break free from Google Search, I was pulled back to Google Search. But notice my use of the past tense. Right, this is why I want to talk to you today, because after many years of failing, I have actually managed to find a genuine replacement. I've actually been using it for ages, but I was afraid to talk about it on the show, or any show really, because of all of my past experiences where I would delude myself into thinking I'd found a viable alternative, genuinely try for days, weeks, or months. Tuk, oh, God bless it, got a great try. But in the end, I fall back because I tolerate it, and the crankiness builds up, and eventually I go, oh, sod it, and I go right back to Google. But that is not true of what I have now been happily using for over a year. That is the commercial search engine Kagi, Kagi. You can find their website and sign up over at, what is that URL? Kagi.com. Okay, yeah, I should have guessed that. So my first encounter with Kagi was actually on a long-form podcast interview with their CEO, and I don't remember which long-form podcast it was. I have a feeling it was probably something Rene Ritchie was doing. Maybe. Anyway, long-form interview, fascinating. I really felt that the guy's vision for the problem he was trying to solve with Kagi and the solution he'd come up with, it just gelled with what I wanted. And I remember making a mental note to say, when these folks come out of their closed beta, I want to give them my money. And then I forgot about them because it took them a while to come out of their closed beta. And they were still in the back of my head, but they were well and truly in the back of my head until they got a full-throated recommendation from a notoriously picky tech columnist named John Gruber. Now, as soon as I heard Gruber recommend them, I remembered the interview, and the fact that someone as picky and fastidious as John was happy told me that they were worth a go. So I signed up for 1 year for a single user, and I immediately flipped my iPhone over because that's generally where I test search engines, because my needs on the iPhone are a little bit more simplistic, and so I like to try things on the iPhone where it's not too much of an interruption to my life. And then if I'm confident enough, I pop it over onto my big, my big boy computers. And so I spent a year using it on my iPhone, and to be honest, I'd forgotten I was using it because it wasn't in my way. I was just getting on with life, not thinking about it. I was getting search results that were good. I wasn't getting distracted by icky ads because there are no ads because I'm a paying customer. And you know something? It was working so well. It hadn't caught my eye how well it was working until the bill came due to renew it. And I got the invoice and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I've been not using Google for a whole year. Do you know something? It's actually nicer. I'm actually enjoying this. This is actually so good. There was no friction, so much so that I forgot about it, which is what I want. I just want to get stuff done. So I mentioned that I had been using Kagi to the better half, and he was intrigued as well. So instead of renewing my single membership, I switched us over to a family plan renewed for a year, and there and then installed the plugin on all of my Macs and my iPad. So now I was on Kagi for every computing device that I use in a personal context. In work, I use the enterprise version of Bing for all sorts of reasons, but I don't like to mix work and personal anyway, so I was never going to use the same thing in work and personal. Either way, I'm 100% Google free. And that's more than a year ago. So the reason I'm now happy to talk about it again is because that family plan spent a year being my universal search on everything. That invoice has been renewed, and I was happy to renew it. And in fact, it renewed in January. So I sort of drafted these show notes back in January, but then now was a good opportunity. So basically, I've been using it full time for a year and a quarter now. And I'm delighted. It's just better. So I'm using it everywhere. I do not miss Google. I do the opposite of miss Google. The only time I've seen Google in the last year is when I fired up my brand new MacBook Pro and I hadn't got around to installing the Kagi plugin yet, and I searched for something and I was presented with ads and junk results and clutter, and I was like, what's gone wrong? Why has the internet gone to, oh, I'm back on Google. It's not just that Kagi's really nice. It's also that Google's just gone to the dogs. So if Google had stood still, I'd still be a delighted Kagi user. But Google hasn't stood still. It's degraded. It's degenerated. So yeah, I was pretty darn quick to get the Kagi plugin on the new MacBook Pro. And yeah, that's my one and only Google experience. And it was very brief and very unpleasant. So if you're going to pay for Kagi, what do you get? First and foremost, you get search results with only one goal: to get you what you want. They're not trying to trick me into going to some other service they own. They're not prioritizing their own stuff over everyone else's because they don't have anything else. They don't have the conflicts of interest that Google is allowing to destroy their reputation. There's also no distracting ads or tricky paid results I need to mentally skirt around, right? The only goal here is to answer my question as well as possible. That is just nicer. The top result is not to be avoided. It's probably what I want. Secondly, I get to choose how the results are presented to me. The results page is customizable. I can choose a layout, not only for the page as a whole, but also for the format of each result on that page. I also get to choose which of the information cards that enrich the page I want to enable and disable, which is cool because one of the things I was afraid I would miss from Google is those Wikipedia cards, which is one of the few things Google got really, really right, in my opinion. I love that if you do a search for something like a country or whatever, you just get the really important information there on that little Wikipedia card. Well, I get exactly the same thing on Kagi because that's one of the optional cards I've chosen to keep enabled. The other thing is, and this is way more powerful, I get to tweak the algorithm. Remember, Kagi is there to make me happy because I pay them directly. There is no middle people. There's no one else in the equation. It's just me and Kagi. So they just want to make me happy. So I get to tilt the algorithm towards my desires, not an algorithm someone else has tilted towards their aims. So, next to every result on a Kagi search page is a little shield icon where you can click on it and you then get options to tell Kagi how you feel about that website. So, on the one extreme, you can just blocklist the website. You can just say, don't ever show me anything from that website ever again. Or you can say, I don't like it. But don't quite hide it forever and ever, but downrank it. Just demote it in the search results. For sites you like, you can start to do the opposite. So you have a never again signal and a less often please signal. Well, you have the inverse of that. You can boost a site. You can basically say, nudge this one a little higher on my search results. It's not so good. I want you to always present it to me at the top of the list if there's a match, but boost it up a little, which tells us then what the final setting is. They call it pinning, but what that means is that if there's a search result on a pinned domain, on a pinned website, that matches what I'm searching at the moment, it will always appear at the very top of my list. So the Stack Overflows and stuff, I get to pin them and they'll always be at the top of my list if there's a match. They won't clutter my screen if there's no match because, hey, it's there to help me, remember? So given that, now I didn't actually pin Stack Overflow and stuff because sometimes they're not the best. So I have given them the little boost so they come higher up my results. But I actually haven't pinned them. To be honest, I haven't pinned anything because I kind of want the algorithm's doing such a good job. I don't want to override it too much, but I do want to nudge it towards the things I prefer. So I do bump things. What I also do is there's nothing that I just nudge down. If I don't like something, I really don't like it. That's the kind of person I am. So all of those news sites that I just don't consider news, that I consider to be speculative fiction at best, if not outright propaganda trying to destroy the world at worst, I just tell Kagi, no, never show me that again. Whether that be British tabloid trash or whether that be American nutsy news, whatever it is, if it makes me cranky, I just tell Kagi, never again, banish it from my site, and it's gone. Never have to see it again. Never darkens my door. It's great. And then one final thing, which I think I've heard Alison mention in a recent show, is that a great annoyance on Safari, and this comes from one of the rare conflicts of interest between me and Apple, is that third-party search engines can't get themselves as your default using a plugin API. Logically, if Apple was trying to make Safari the best possible browser, there would absolutely be an API that Kagi could use to become the default search without faffing about. But the billions with a B dollars that Google pay Apple every year to default to shoving people at Google set up a perverse incentive, where Apple is incentivized to make it as bloody annoying as possible to leave Google, to keep those billions of dollars coming pouring in. Like I say, there are very few places where Apple and I are at odds in terms of incentives, and this is one of them. But, the good people at Kagi have found a workaround. They shouldn't need a workaround, but they do, and thankfully they have found one. And it is an officially supported workaround. It's not hackery, it's just creative use of a different and actually existent API. Apple's content blocking APIs. So you can use content blocking APIs to redirect URLs from one domain to another. Usually you're trying to get rid of ads and stuff or something else you find objectionable. What Kagi does is it uses that API to redirect Google domains to itself. And it just uses the same query string format as Google. So when you type something into the address bar with the Kagi plugin on, it rewrites it to a Kagi search. And when you hit enter from typing into the address bar, you land on a Kagi results page instead of a Google results page. And it works across all versions of Safari on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. So yes, I have to remember to install that plugin. But hey, once I do, no more Google. It works like an absolute charm. So, short version, Kagi gives me better results than Google. It lets me pay with my money instead of my privacy. And it works great everywhere, even in Safari. You're probably thinking to yourself, it must cost Kagi a lot of money to deliver that service while operating sustainably. And you'd be correct, they got bills to pay. So this is why they charge a realistic price. And I don't consider that to be a problem. I consider that to be a feature because I'm starting to become really quite dependent on these folks. I want them to have a viable model. They need to be able to operate sustainably as a business or I have a problem. Now, that doesn't mean that they're exorbitantly expensive. They're realistically expensive. So our family plan costs exactly $151.20 per year, which, if I can do math right, works out at $12.60 per month. Now, again, that might seem like a lot, but remember that the estimates for what, and I believe these estimates come from Meta rather than Google, but we expect the number to be very similar across all big tech. The last estimate I remember seeing, which I think was from Meta, is that they generate about $10 to $20 per user per year by monetizing their data. So even if that Kagi bill were just for me, it'd actually already be value for money. Because it's less than, if it's between 10 and 20 worth of privacy value that Google are probably extracting from me, then paying $12.60 for the two of us is actually really good value for money, isn't it? Because it's for two instead of for one. So instead of it being between $20 and $40 worth of value, it's $12.60 worth of money. So actually, I think it's great. So Kagi.com if you would prefer to pay for really good searches that you get to customize and control with money rather than privacy. Highly recommended. 2 thumbs up from me and from John Gruber.
Steve and I stopped by the Wireless Power Consortium booth simply to say thank you for Qi 2. And I ran into Craig Williams here and gave him our thanks, and he accepted those thanks. But he started telling us about something else other than Qi that the Wireless Power Consortium is working on. Now, he works for a company called Medea, which is a member company of the Wireless Power Consumption Consortium. So Qi is K-I?
Yes.
All right, so now tell us what the Qi is all about.
So Qi expands beyond Qi to go to a higher power level for kitchen appliances primarily. So that enables you to take wireless cordless appliances, no battery in this appliance, and put it on a Qi-enabled transmitter, typically a cooktop, and power the appliance wirelessly from your
So what he's just done is he picked up a blender that has no wires, nothing up his sleeves. He set it down on this cooktop, and he told the cooktop to power it. So you said this is a key
standard. So these are both key appliance.
It might be easier to talk for him to hear if we turn that off.
I'll turn it off.
Just lift it off. There you go.
Just lift it off. That turns it off. So all the products have to be key products. So when I put the blender on there, or it could be a juicer or any appliance.
Toaster.
It could be a toaster. And it could, as long as it's key, it talks to the transmitter. They confirm that they're both key, and then it can provide wireless power to the appliance. There are no batteries. It is a wireless power transmitting up to 2,200 watts.
Holy cow.
You can power almost any small appliance you can think of. They're all yet to be developed, but this is what's coming from Wireless Power Consortium.
That's amazing. So now I also see a pan here.
This is based off induction technology. So induction cooking requires a ferrous, like a iron or steel pan to do induction cooking, and it doesn't heat the cooktop. It transmits waves into the metal, and that's what heats up.
So is that normal induction cooking? Nothing to do with key?
Nothing to do with key, except key uses the same energy transfer method to transfer energy. So
you can share a cooktop between pans and blenders?
Yes, so this spot right here has a key, but it works for cooking, and it works for cooking, and it would work for an appliance.
That is bananas. Now, you said the key standard just came out how long ago?
Last quarter of 2024.
Okay, so the reason you said the products have yet to be all developed is because it just came out. But this is a fascinating future. Where would people go to learn more about this?
The Wireless Power Consortium. I don't know if you can get to the QR code.
He's got a QR code. We'll take a picture of that and get it into the notes here for the interview. This is fascinating, Craig. Thank you. And thank you again for companies just working together to say, if we all work on this together, it's going to be a lot better. Like if we'd started Wi-Fi together the same way, if we had the whole smart home thing had been started together, we'd be in a much better place now. So starting here, this is fantastic. Thank you for the work you guys are doing.
You're welcome.
You people, I should say.
How high should a screen be on your desk? Current ergonomic wisdom says the top of the visible screen should be at your eye level when seated, but I don't think it's that simple. One thing seemed certain, my Apple Studio display should not just sit on my desk. I've used a glass riser that worryingly bowed in the middle, a hardback copy of The Complete Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, an old camera box, an old home-built wooden riser that was for my brother's BBC Micro in the 1980s, and, most recently, a decommissioned Apple Airport Extreme. After recent medical issues, I was discussing my computer neck with my physiotherapist, and I suggested perhaps I should place my screen higher on the desk. He agreed. I did some measurements of the perfect height and then added a small margin to it to promote looking higher up. I settled on an ideal distance between 100 and 110 millimeters from the top of the desk. Furthermore, I wanted something with a reasonably small footprint that was sturdy and ideally with some utilizable space beneath it. I chose the 12 South Curve Riser. Crucially, the Curve Riser top surface is 105 millimeters above the surface it rests on. Perfect! Its top is usefully but not significantly bigger than the foot of my studio display, just enough room to put some of my ornaments up out of the way. It has a slightly wider footprint on the desk. The total area is 245 millimeters deep by 320 millimeters wide. The feet of the riser are large D shapes that project inwards from the sides. A shelf is provided which sits about halfway between the desk and the top surface. This shelf is, in my opinion, the only weak point of the product. After setting up the riser on my desk and placing my studio display atop it, I thought the shelf might be a good place for my CalDigit Thunderbolt dock. The trouble is, there's only 50 millimeters of vertical space, and while plenty for the dock, it is impossible to get my hand in there to attach any cables to the back. I eventually achieved this by getting all the cables in the right place, including routing, and then placing the dock in from behind, an awkward procedure at best. However, the worst part was that in attempting to move a cable, I discovered the shelf is removable when it suddenly and loudly popped out of its mounting points. Trying to reattach the shelf was equally awkward without removing the monitor and attempting it in isolation. Even so, the 3 lugs on each side of the shelf insert into soft silicone plugs in the main body, and these deform far too easily, meaning the shelf is extremely difficult to slot into place. Even after fighting the pliant silicone, the shelf didn't seem precise enough to fit snugly, so I was constantly wary it would pop out again with great drama at the next opportunity. After a while, I removed the shelf and put the dock on the desk. The silicone plugs can be removed so it won't even be noticeable. Without the shelf, I'll have a decent 100mm of clearance. Without the shelf, it's an excellent addition to my setup. The only other issue I can pick with it is the shipping cost. I ordered it together with a book arc from 12 South directly, and the shipping came to significantly more than the cost of the items. You can order the curve riser in black or white from 12 South for $19.99.
I can't second this recommendation from personal experience, but I will throw in a plug-in for a different riser from 12 South that I do use. The sort of little cousin of this curve riser is the Curve SE, which I use pretty much every day that I work from home to keep my work laptop screen at just the right height to have it perfectly align with my 27-inch monitor, which I have plugged in as an external display to that laptop so that I can seamlessly move my mouse straight across, and of course my eyes straight across from the laptop screen to the monitor, back and forth. And I am extremely fond of the Curve SE. It's so simple, it's so trivial, but it's so well made, so rugged, so, the rubberized stuff holds the laptop perfectly. It's just really nice. They just make great products. So thank you, Alistair, and 2 big thumbs up from me.
One of the things you learn as you start learning about accessibility is that if you don't have a disability right now, that you're supposed to call yourself currently abled, because if you live long enough, you're probably going to have something that you're going to need to have fixed. My granddaughter is deaf in one ear and has a cochlear implant, and she's got a hearing aid in the other, so I'm really interested in some of the accessible tech for those with hearing impairments. We are in the Science Speak booth, and I'm here with Nicholas Wilson to tell us about a really, really cool innovation.
Awesome. So we are Science Speak. We do sign language recognition and sign language avatars. In particular, any deaf person can sign into our software. It'll recognize what they're signing and voice it out. And then at the same time, the hearing person can respond back, and that's shown through a lifelike avatar. So if we go over to the monitor, let me start over the video. So the way that this works is that if someone speaks into the system, in a minute, the avatar will sign exactly what was said, and this is actually completely AI generated. And then over here, as Nico signs back, what will happen is down here, whatever he signed will be shown in text and also voiced out on
so basically a deaf person and someone without a hearing impairment would be able to have a full-on conversation. One person hearing, one person seeing sign.
Yep, indeed. And we, in addition to that, also provide captions for those who don't rely on sign. So that way all individuals can have full...
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
So in addition to sign language access, we additionally provide captioning to provide access to those people who might rely on captioning and not on sign language. So for example, late deafened individuals. The goal of this is to allow hearing individuals and deaf or hard of hearing individuals to interact. And if at any point the technology is not working, you can also transfer over to a human interpreter. We have human interpreters on call that can be brought into a conversation. So over here, if you see, I'm about to press a button. And then a human interpreter picks up and continues the conversation from there to make sure that accessibility is rendered.
So back to the captions, I have one question. If you have captions, that would mean that someone who is deafblind could participate in the conversation with a Braille display, no?
So we've done some initial experiments with deafblind individuals. we've noticed that for deaf-blind individuals, and I mean in general, each individual is unique in terms of their accessibility preference. So some just want customization to be able to make some text larger. Others want an output to like a Braille display. But we have made this system screen reader compatible so that it can be used that way.
These silly people, everybody seems to be different. I don't know how that happened, right?
Yeah. I feel like the world would be easier but a lot less interesting if everyone was the same.
There you go, exactly. I think Steve actually had a question.
I had a question about at one point in the display, one of the faces was blurred. What was the blurring for?
So that was during the part where it was the human interpreter came in?
So right now, because we're showing this publicly, we decided that we wanted to protect the identity of our interpreters, so we decided to blur that. But because this AI avatar it's a completely fake person, doesn't really have it wasn't anyone's face.
Until they get rights.
Or somehow they get birthed, but one day maybe.
So this doesn't require any kind of hardware. You're just sitting in front of your Mac laptop here, you got the camera on, and you can have this conversation today through the software. So is it a web service?
Right, so you're absolutely right. This requires no external hardware, just a normal RGB camera that's on any webcam. Right now we provide it as a software as a service, both in this package, which is our automated interpreting system, our AIS, which we provide at $200 a month. And then in addition, we also have an API that people can use, which is metered per minute usage.
So I'm guessing, I'm just spitballing here, but I'm guessing that a human interpreter costs more than $200 a month to always be there for you.
Oh, yes, definitely. And that's not the only issue. Human interpreters are fantastic for a lot of situations, but unfortunately there's a huge interpreter shortage, so they're just not available a lot of the time. Oftentimes you'll hear about interpreters being requested for appointments and then the interpreter calling in sick and the appointment needing to be moved. Other times interpreters are cost prohibitive.
With this poor avatar, he's just stuck in that room all the time. He's always there for you.
Yeah, we just keep on working him 24/7.
Okay, if people wanted to learn more about SignSpeak, where would they go?
Yeah, thank you. You can go to sign-speak.com. That's signspeak.com.
Very good. Thank you, Nicholas. This is really neat. I'm very excited about it.
As you know, I do my own show, Let's Talk Apple and Let's Talk Photography. So I know that it costs Alison money to produce the shows because, like Alison, I depend on the generosity of appreciative listeners to support my work through donations. So, if you'd like to help Alison to keep this show going, please consider going to podfeet.com/Patreon to become a monthly sponsor, or going to podfeet.com/donate to make a once-off donation. Right, it's one of those solo security bits I'm less than fond of. I still prefer to record these to, saying nothing, but I do definitely miss Alison being here, and in an example of absolute perfect timing, NocillaCast away Mild Demons perfectly expressed exactly why it is I much prefer to have Alison here over on the Podfeet Slack at podfeet.com/Slack. What he posted there was, I really enjoy it, and I think most of us do, when you explain things to Aunt Podfeet and she tries to wrap her head around them. The best part is when one of you says something that doesn't quite make sense to me, and I'm sitting there thinking, that doesn't seem right. And then Aunt Podfeet jumps in with, wait, do you mean? And you go on to explain it another way, and then I'm like, now I get it. Yeah, that's exactly why I love having Alison here. I do my best to remember that I'm not a regular human anymore because I'm a cybersecurity specialist with a little more experience than is healthy when you're trying to explain things to actual human beings. And from time to time I mess up and I make wrong assumptions about everyone else's knowledge, and Alison is the perfect foil to bring me right back to earth and make me say it all again in a simpler way. Right, let's get on with some more normal feedback and follow-ups, etc. I was rather critical of Oracle last time. I basically said, in my mind, they've earned themselves a black eye with their failure to communicate properly for the Oracle health breach. And really, they keep digging down. They need to start digging up at some stage, but they're just making it worse for themselves because actually, they didn't just have a breach in Oracle Health, they also had a breach in Oracle Cloud, OCI, but they're kind of sort of saying they're not because they've rebranded the old OCI to OCI Vintage or Legacy or something, and the new one it's just OCI, so they're saying, OCI wasn't breached because the real live data with actual stuff for real people that really matters, that has lots and lots and lots of valuable actual personal data, they've brained at something else, so now they can say they don't have a breach in the product that everyone knows them for. It's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. They're also doing that thing where they're refusing to put anything in writing and they'll only communicate with their paying customers over the phone and tell them what's going on, but never, ever, ever write it down, which is lawyerly horse poop. That's disgraceful. So the Oracle, in my mind, now have a pair of black eyes because this is despicable. This is not how you respond to a security incident. Right, with my displeasure of one of the major tech companies out of the way, let's do the opposite. Let us share my pleasure with some nice but small pieces of progress that Microsoft have succeeded in making on a bunch of ongoing, slowly catchy monkey improvements that we've mentioned in previous Security Bits segments. So one of the more dramatic recent events in cybersecurity was the infamous CrowdStrike outage when an update to the third-party cybersecurity tool from the called CrowdStrike bricked, and I actually use that word semi-advisedly, bricked thousands of enterprise computers all around the world, leaving them unable to boot without a technician visiting the machine physically to bring it back to life, which is not a full bricking because it was restorable with physical access, but in terms of remote support, it was effectively bricked. And that made the whole outage worse. If it was something that could be fixed remotely, it wouldn't have been nearly as much of a problem and cancelled as many flights, yada, yada, yada. But, it wasn't remote fixable. Well, that's something Microsoft promised they would try to basically to mitigate against, to reduce the number of kinds of things that could cause that amount of problem. And they have just released a new feature, which they're calling Quick Machine Recovery, which is a tool for Windows 11 that allows remote fix of boot crashes by basically jumping in earlier in the boot process and making the machine remote manageable even without the full OS booted. Obviously, this isn't going to always work because if something really, 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 really low level goes wrong, that even Quick Machine Recovery can't get booted, then you're still SOL. But nonetheless, this is definitely progress where the simplest parts of the OS can be booted up enough to enable remote fixes, even if the full OS fails to boot. So that would have been very helpful for CrowdStrike. Another thing Microsoft are very much trying to do is to sort of beat the normal trade-off, which is convenience for security, by reducing the inconvenience of staying patched. And one of the things that drives Windows users potty is having to reboot for security updates because, us Mac users are used to the notion that you hit reboot and then 30 seconds later you're exactly back where you left off with all of your tabs open, all of your apps open, all of your windows in the right place. It's as if you've never done anything. In less time than it takes to go pee, you can do a reboot. That's not how it goes in Windows land, and so Windows updates make people very cranky, and they put them off, and they put them off, and they put them off, and corporate policy says you can only pause it 3 times, and so on the third day when it finally won't let them pause, they get very cranky and phone the service desk when in the middle of a lecture their machine reboots and their slides go away. Yeah, I'm definitely not speaking from experience here. Anyway, what all of that is getting around to is that Microsoft is continuing to roll out a feature that's going to reduce that pain significantly. It's called hot patching, and it's not quite a way to get to 0 reboots, but it means that for months at a time, even kernel-level security updates can be applied without rebooting the machine. This is a trick Linux has done for some time, live kernel patching it's called on the Linux end, and it's kind of amazing. It is the digital equivalent of changing your tire while driving down the highway at full speed, but it is now functional and tested enough that Microsoft are rolling it out in the corporate versions of Windows. This is obviously the next step in a rollout, which I expect will arrive on everyone's desk. When I say that you can't do it forever, it's because what you end up with is the OS running in memory is live fixes, and the OS on disk is the actual security updates. And there is a real risk at some point in time that patches in memory break things completely. And there's some sort of inconsistency develops between what's in memory and what's on disk. And then when you do eventually reboot, the whole thing ties itself in a knot. So to minimize the blast radius, or to minimize the risks of problems over time that you can get from having patches on top of patches on top of patches, Microsoft are going to enforce a reboot once a quarter. So instead of your machine having to reboot every month for Patch Tuesday, it'll only have to reboot 4 times a year, which is progress. It's better, 3 times better, 4 versus 12. And then finally, one of the things that Microsoft both get a lot of praise for, and in my opinion, do too much of, is retain old technology. They keep things backwards compatible for a very, very long time, so as not to break any apps for their enterprise users. But actually, I think they overshoot the mark, and what they end up doing is making enterprises overly vulnerable. And so I'm always happy when Microsoft bite the bullet and deprecate some old legacy dangerous stuff, which is why it's good news that Microsoft ActiveX is being blocked by default in Office 365 and Office 2024. Yay! GitHub have also responded to the increased level of abuse of their services we've been seeing by malicious actors. These are watering hole attacks, right? The attackers are focusing their energies on the places where the people they want to attack, i.e. developers, naturally congregate, i.e. places like GitHub. And they're basically, what GitHub are doing is making it easier for organizations to buy the advanced security tools that they offer their high-end. Until now, they only offered very high-end customers. So the security tools were like a bonus extra for their most professional tier, which meant that in order to get the best security protection, you also had to buy a whole bunch of other advanced features. And while very large organizations would do that anyway, say, you know, a smaller app developer with 2 or 3 members of staff, they're going to want an organization, they're going to want to have paid services so they can do more things in private. They're not going to need every single bell and whistle because there's only 3 of them. But they do want the security tools, and that was impossible before. You either had to buy lots and lots of things you didn't want to get the security tools, or you couldn't have the security tools. Well, now the security tools are being sold separately. So you can have whatever size of GitHub account you need for your actual organization, be it a little 3-person company or a massive 3 million person enterprise. You buy the GitHub account you need for your org, and then you buy the security tools separately. So this, you know, it's not great. It doesn't help us freebie users, but hey, it's still progress because most of the most important things on GitHub are managed by organizations. And even if those organizations are open source communities, they probably have a paid GitHub account coming out of the various donations that are funding the open source research. So this still applies really to lots and lots and lots of free software as well. So it's just going to make GitHub safer. So it's all good. Another repeat theme here in the last year or two has been the rampant abuse of Google Ads. Basically, the ads are riddled with malware, and that's despite Google's best attempts to stop that happening. And I can now tell you that the massive scourge of ads that have snuck through are the tip of an even bigger iceberg because Google have reported that they blocked 5 billion with a B malicious ads in 2024. 5 billion were blocked. So yeah, the tens, hundreds or thousands even of malicious ads that we've talked about getting through, they are kind of the tip of the 5 billion malicious ad iceberg. But it does rather underline the point that the whole model is not sustainable. This idea of selling cheap ads no one ever vets to fund your enterprise is on a hiding to nowhere. But hey. We also got an explanation in the lucid... Well, it is an explanation. It was offered as an excuse or an attempt to shift the blame, but it is neither of those things. It is, in fact, purely an explanation. What am I talking about? Signalgate. We now know how the spectacular whoopsie happened when the National Security Advisor managed to literally invite a journalist into a top secret military discussion happening against all the bloody rules, laws, etc. of the United States government on the public Telegram service. Well, yeah, so how did the journalist get there? Well, it's because the National Security Advisor unthinkingly accepted a Siri suggestion to update a the cell phone number for one of the contacts in his phone, and inadvertently added the cell phone number for the journalist to a different contact who wasn't the journalist. And what the National Security Advisor tried to do was invite the other contact in, and what he actually ended up doing was inviting in the journalist. Now, like I say, the administration are spinning this as it's Apple's fault that we ended up breaking the law like this and leaking dangerous military secrets. No, it isn't. The problem is your National Security Advisor was careless twice. Not just once, but twice. The very use of Signal for this conversation was carelessness that is literally legal, and the earlier carelessness was unthinkingly accepting a Siri suggestion. They're not Siri orders, they're not Siri automated actions, they're Siri suggestions, and they're labeled as suggestions. Do you want ? They give you a no button. You should probably think before you click yes, especially as the National Security Advisor. So yeah, making 2 careless mistakes is not better than making 1 illegal careless mistake. It's even worse. So yeah, not really an excuse. Also, completely, totally and utterly underlines my point from last time. Humans make mistakes. This is inevitable because we are humans. That is why you are supposed to use closed, private communication mechanisms for government secrets. It's not possible to accidentally invite a journalist into a private government channel, no matter how many oopsies you do. And the reason you do that is because you will make oopsies. You stay on a place where the blast radius for the inevitable oopsies are as small as possible. So basically what you've done here is prove my point. I didn't really mean to go on as big a rant, but hey, Alison's not here to reel me in. So these things happen. Oh, speaking of rants, I'll keep this one short. We don't actually have an answer. We don't really know very much, but we can now officially say that we know as a fact that the UK government really is attempting to break iCloud Advanced Encryption for all of planet Earth using the supposed veil of secrecy that is the US Snoopers Charter, or so UK's Snoopers Charter law. Apple filed an appeal with the secret court that oversees the super secret law, demanding that given how much of a public interest there is in this, that the veil of secrecy be lifted and the public actually be told that this case is going on and maybe, open it up a bit more as the case continues. Well, the court has agreed that it is okay to officially admit that all of this is going on. Exactly how much openness we're going to get isn't clear. There has been no decision, so really we haven't got any news, but this has gone from being a rumour, a very well sourced, now rumour is probably the wrong word, an unconfirmed, in fact unconfirmable report, to something we now know for sure officially. So I guess that's progress. Right, I have a deep dive for you this week on my own. I hope I don't mess this up. Sorry, mild demons, if I do. There's no Alison here to pull me back. Anyway, how is Apple training Apple Intelligence without breaking their privacy promise? The TLDR is there's nothing even vaguely nefarious or dangerous going on with the changes Apple made public this week. None of this that Apple are doing is enabled by default. It's all opt-in. And for people like me who most certainly do opt in to sharing analytics with Apple, your privacy and my privacy are provably protected by the way in which Apple is doing this. So how does it work? Okay. Fundamentally, there's an idea at the root of all of this. When you're interested in big trends, you don't need exact data. In fact, just about every real-world statistic is built on top of noisy and incomplete data because there's actually very few situations where everything can be known perfectly. Right, start with a simple question. What percentage of Americans own a Ford vehicle? Very easy question to ask. We rarely think twice about how, when you see those kind of numbers, they come to be. But for that kind of a number, which you'll see quoted in earnings calls and media reports and whatnot, for that kind of a number to be actually completely truthful, the analytics company compiling that number would need to get an honest, truthful response from every single solitary American, which is impossible. So none of these numbers are actually based on exact data. They're all based on small samples that we hope are representative, where we have at least a good reason to believe that most of the respondents are not lying to us. And as long as the sample is pretty representative of the population as a whole, and as long as the responses are fairly honest, we get usable data out the other end. Now, computer usage data is actually one of those rare exceptions where you can get perfectly clean data, but at a wee bit of a cost called everyone's privacy. So, to determine which typos Apple's autocorrect fixes most often, iOS and macOS could log every single time, every single change that autocorrect makes and send all of those before and afters to Apple. That would completely violate Apple's privacy promises. But Apple don't want to do that, but they do actually want to get a reasonable understanding of what's happening with autocorrect in the real world when actual people actually use it. So how do Apple square that circle? Well, they do it by intentionally adding random gibberish to the data to make it noisy. So if you know the accuracy of your sampling, right, which for macOS features, we can actually know how accurate our sampling is. And if you know the accuracy you need for your big picture overall result, so we know that we can get 100% accurate data, but we know we don't need 100% accurate data to do useful statistics on the back end. Well, if you know how much there is available accuracy and how much accuracy you actually need, you can do a little bit of math and you can calculate the amount of intentional lies you can inject into the raw data without actually affecting your results negatively. This is what Apple actually have been doing for years for all of their analytics, and it has the fancy pants name differential privacy. It's literally intentional lies, but at a level that makes individual pieces of data meaningless while preserving the value of the overall averages. So you can never take one piece of analytics data from Apple and use it as evidence of a person doing a thing, because you know for a fact there's a high measurable likelihood it's absolute fiction. It's an intentional falsehood injected by the analytics. But when Apple put all the pieces together, the signal jumps out above the intentional noise, so Apple get a meaningful understanding of what's going on in the real world. So that's differential privacy, and that for years now, every time you install a new iPhone or a new Mac, a little thing pops up with a little blue icon of two people shaking hands, asking you if you'd like to send anonymous analytics to Apple. Well, this is how those anonymous analytics are made anonymous. So Apple are extending that approach to Apple Intelligence. And for tools like Image Playgrounds and Genmoji, that's pretty easy because you just give it simple prompts, which is basically the same as autocorrect, right? Same sort of quantity of data, same sort of type of data. So the prompts that the people who opt in to sending Apple Analytics will be shared with Apple using differential privacy. So it's just like how Apple have been maintaining, or depending on how good you think a job they're doing, but that's a matter for another day, their autocorrect features, that same process is being applied to the prompts you give to Image Playgrounds and Genmoji. And that works great for little prompts. That does not work for AI features that take as their input gigantic chunks of text, like summarization and rewording tools. So this is where Apple are doing something what I think is wonderfully clever. As a computer scientist, I just adore what Apple have chosen to do here. So instead of training and testing their models on real emails from people's actual inboxes, which would be a privacy train wreck, they're using generative AI to make fake but realistic emails to test on instead, so-called synthetic data. So this protects our user privacy perfectly because the training data isn't from any human anywhere. It's all made up. It's all synthetic. But, in order for this not to result in absolutely awful AI, you need to quality control your fake data. You need to be able to check if it's accurate. It has to be realistic synthetic data, otherwise the training is useless. So Apple don't need to harvest all of our emails to train its AI on. Apple need to compare our real emails to their fake emails. And that you can do with differential privacy. So Apple aren't going to gather a single email and upload it to a single server. Instead, they're going to randomly send down to our devices samples of the fake data. Again, only for people who opt in. So our device is going to receive a random sampling of fake emails. And then on our devices, our OS is going to do a statistical comparison. So not a detailed word, not a diff, right? Not a word by word diff, but a statistical comparison that's looking at sort of big picture features of the real and fake emails. And it's going to reply back to Apple basically saying how well or not your real emails line up with the fake emails. Is there a match basically in your emails for these fake emails? And it's going to intentionally lie. It's going to use differential privacy to intentionally lie. But there will still be a signal in the noise, which is going to allow Apple not to train on your email, but to verify that their fake training data is realistic. Right? That level of interaction is vitally important. And I've seen a lot of headlines about how Apple is slurping up your emails. No, it isn't. No. That is not what is going on here at all. And that's very important. So, key takeaways. None of the data sent to Apple includes any kind of identifier, by the way. That has always been true of the anonymous analytics. So No device ID, no user ID, no Apple IDs or Apple account, no network identifiers like IP addresses, nothing identifiable at all whatsoever has ever been included on analytics data, and that is true of the additional analytics for the people who opt in that will cover Apple Intelligence. Everything that is sent is intentionally polluted with lies, so no single piece of data can ever be used as evidence of anything, because it's not probably, but likely false. For long pieces of text, users are not sending any actual data to Apple, but they're just returning accuracy scores, comparing real data against dummy data. And just to say it again, one last time, all of this is opt-in rather than opt-out, let alone compulsory. So this is the most privacy-respecting way I can think of to train large language models. Don't hoover up real data. Make it up. Verify it's okay from the people who choose to help you with that verification, and then use your fake data. So I say, A, some good computer science, Apple, and B, yay for privacy protection. It is not correct that you have to choose between good features and privacy. And this is yet another example of Apple's cleverly squaring that circle. Links in the show notes to Apple's full blog post describing everything they're doing, and some nice summaries from Mac Stories and Cult of Mac. Right, into our regular programming then, with some action alerts. Apple have patched just about everything, some of it twice. So current OSs went to iPadOS 18.4, iOS and iPadOS 18.4, macOS Sequoia 15.4, tvOS 18.4, visionOS 2.4, and then the legacy OSs went to iPadOS and iOS 17. Actually, it was just the iPad went to 17.7.6, and then both the iPad and the iOS itself went to 16.7.11. iOS and iPadOS went to 15.8.4. macOS Sonoma went to 14.7.5, and Ventura to 13.7.5. In other words, Apple patched way more OSs back than usual, because they were patching a whole bunch of stuff, including 2 actively exploited 0 days. So even very old Apple devices have security updates. And that was about a week, that was in the first week since we last recorded. And then in the second week since we last recorded, a few more updates to those updates came out. So iOS went to 18.4.1 and macOS Sequoia 15.4.1. And again, 0 days involved here, and there are also matching updates for tvOS and visionOS. So lots and lots and lots of patch for people in Apple land. And people in Microsoft land also have lots of patches because it was Patch Tuesday. 1 0 day, but 134 other fixes in total. So I guess 133 other fixes. So lots and lots of patch for Microsoft people too. And then, those of you with Android phones capable of being secured, you also have some patch to do, because Google released their monthly Android security update, which also fixes a bunch of 0 days and 60 non-0 days. So patch if you can. If you can't, maybe buy a securable phone. Just a thought. And in good news, as an example of the kind of copying I love to see, as well as getting all of those vital patches, you will also get a copy of Apple's recently added iOS auto restart feature. So if a phone has been in shallow sleep for 3 days, it will reboot itself to force it into its most secure, most safe state, which is a good protection. Google have also patched something called Quick Share, which is their equivalent of AirDrop, and that was a fairly evil-sounding bug that would allow silent transfers to be pushed at people's devices without their consent. That's dangerous because it can end up with something you didn't expect to be there sitting in your downloads folder, which may be an exe file disguised as a PDF or something, and you might double click on it by mistake. So that wasn't good. That's fixed. So if you do use quick share patchy, and if you're a Windows WhatsApp user, there was a fairly nasty bug that allowed attackers to run malicious code, a little bit of remote code execution. Never good. So patch your Windows WhatsApp as well. In terms of worthy warnings then, I have only one story to share with you, but it's a doozy. A US testing lab, so they do medical tests, have been breached and have exposed the health data of 1.6 million with an M people. The company in question is Laboratory Services Cooperative, or LSC, which is, according to the news story, a Seattle-based non-profit organization that provides centralized laboratory services to its member affiliates, including select Planned Parenthood centers. This could be very sensitive data. I did my usual test of reading the article for the magic line, and victims have been notified, and I didn't find it. I also didn't find the line that says they hadn't, but I didn't find the line that says they had. I did find mention of a portal for people who think or fear they could be caught up in this to get more information. So if you're a US resident and you have reason to believe you could be one of those 1.6 million people, I would suggest reading the story on Bleeping Computer and figuring out what best you can do from there. Moving into notable news, I am getting the crankiness-inducing bit out of the way first. This will hopefully be the last of Ranty Bart for this solo security bits. The Trump administration are continuing to undermine the cybersecurity of the United States, and in this case, the bloody whole world. Thank you. The most dramatic thing from an international point of view is that the Trump administration almost killed the CVE system, which we all use for cataloguing and scoring known security vulnerabilities. It's the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Database, CVE. That database is the data source for just about every vulnerability detection tool in use today. So if you're a cybersecurity professional, you're running tools to monitor your organization for known bugs. And it's going to present them for you in a dashboard where you then have to triage what of your finite resources goes to which of the known problems. No CVE database, no list of known problems, no scoring of those problems to allow triage, and no way to prioritize your response. You end up doing cybersecurity blind. That will be catastrophic. Not only does the CVE database list the vulnerabilities and what products they affect, not only does it give us a unified name that we can all agree on so that we all know we're talking about the same thing instead of the Thunderbird bug or whatever, because there's loads and loads and loads of those. The CVE database is also where we get the CVSS scores. So when something is a perfect CVSS of 10, that's a 10 out of 10 on the CVE database using the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS. Those scores are figured out by people who are paid money to do that work. Those people work for the CVE organization, and those people have been members of the US quasi-governmental agency called MITRE. I find it very hard to classify what MITRE is. They're like a private company paid for by the US government. I don't know what that makes them. Either way, the actual human beings who have been running the CVE database for years now work at MITRE, and they have always been paid by the US government in some form. And in recent years, since the relatively new agency came into being, it has been via CISA, the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency. And the contract for MITRE from CISA was due for renewal. And the Trump administration didn't. They were going to let it lapse completely. The cybersecurity community raised a hue and cry, and the Trump administration mildly backed down. They didn't actually renew the contract and solve the problem. What they did was invoke a clause that says that we'll extend it under the current terms for a bit. The contract needs to be renewed. It hasn't been renewed, but it's not dead yet. Now, what's interesting to note is that the CVE database, while the people doing the actual work are on contract from MITRE, they're working for an independent board that oversees the CVE system. And that independent board has been growing ever more nervous about the fact that they depend completely on the US government for their funding for some time. So there have already been moves afoot to try to diversify the funding sources and to spread the work out. Whether or not it's that different people start to pay MITRE to do the same work, or whether some of the work moves away from MITRE to other places, that's all TBC, right? But the moves are already underway, and they have now been accelerated. So this last-minute extension gives the board more time to find a new way to fund the CVE system. I think it's probably for the better in the long, long run that the international community has had a sharp shock here. And I think we'll soon find that other sources of funding become available to keep the CVE system running. Because, like I say, the cybersecurity of planet Earth depends on all of this. This then gives me a segue into the story which I would find most disturbing if I was an American, which is that the Trump administration have now launched a full frontal attack on the first ever director of the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency, CISA, Chris Krebs. Chris Krebs was a Trump appointee, by the way, because the agency was set up under the first Trump administration. And why is Chris Krebs in trouble? Because he did a sterling job overseeing the security of the 2020 elections and properly declared that they were run legitimately. This is known. There have been numerous attempts to disprove this reality. They have all failed miserably because, in fact, Chris Krebs was sharing with the world reality. But hey, don't let reality get in the way of a good piece of propaganda. The president released a presidential memorandum which directs all agencies not only to remove Chris Krebs' security clearance, but also that of every employee from the company he works for, Sentinel-1. And it instructs the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security to launch an investigation into Chris Krebs and everything CISA did during his time as director, and to propose appropriate remedial or preventative actions. So, a lovely quote, I say lovely. Krebs, through CISA, falsely and baselessly denied that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen, including by inappropriately and categorically dismissing widespread election malfeasance and serious vulnerabilities with voting machines. That, folks, is absolute lies. Right? I'm quoting from the memo. That is not planet Earth reality. That is fiction. Not just fiction, malicious untruth, lies. Chris Krebs has resigned from Sentinel-1 to dedicate himself full-time to a PR and legal fight against the Trump administration. Thank you, Chris Krebs. You shouldn't have to park your whole life for this, but thank you for parking your whole life. He's also hoping that this will redirect Trump's ire away from the perfectly innocent people at Sentinel-1. I don't know if that's going to work. But hats off, Mr. Krebs, you deserve to be treated with respect. You're fighting the good fight here. All right, I'm just going to be blunt here. This is full-on authoritarianism. This is twisting the power of the state to persecute individuals who say things the state doesn't like. and literally trying to force companies into accepting false narratives that just aren't true. This whole 2020 was stolen is literally Trump's Hitler-esque big lie. The fact that it's ruining the life of an excellent cybersecurity specialist makes me extra sad. Chris Krebs is probably the most respected person, in my opinion, in the entire first Trump administration. He does not deserve this. Very cranky making. In normal times, I'd be getting all cranky about the fact that it is now official. Google has an illegal monopoly in online advertising. At least so a judge has ruled in a completely different antitrust case to the one a different judge ruled on last year. So now Google are currently, although they're appealing both, officially illegal monopolists in search and advertising. Advertising having just joined the club. Google are spinning this as a semi-victory. They say that the judge didn't do everything the DOJ asked. For example, the judge didn't find that the acquisition of DoubleClick all those decades ago was anti-competitive, so Google's chalking that up as a win. And as I already hinted at, Google will be appealing. So this one is going to run and run and run, just like the other one is running and running and running. A very significant piece of news for anyone who has a secure website or anything else that uses an SSL or a TLS cert issued by a certificate authority that makes up part of the public key infrastructure. Basically every website on the planet and lots of other things too. You all need to be aware that the lifespan of certificates is coming right down. The negotiations for what has now been formally agreed started off at an even scarier place than we've landed. They started off with Apple saying, hey, how about we go to 30-day certs by the end of 2026? That would have been terrifying. That was a starting point for negotiations. That's not where we've ended up, although we haven't ended up that different a place, but we have ended up on a very different timeline. So we're getting the change in 3 phases. So nothing is happening until the 15th of March next year, when both the work you do to validate control of your domain and the certificates that get issued for any domain will have a maximum life of 200 days. That's currently a year and a few days change. I think you get 10 days grace. A year after that, on March 15th, 2027, those 200 days for both certificates and domain validation come down to 100 days. That's a little over 3 months. That's starting to become quite the chore. And then in 2 years after that, so on the 15th of March 2029, so we're skipping 2028, no changes then, certificates are coming down to 47 days, which is a month and a half. But domain control validation, so what you have to do to get a new cert issued, those validations are coming down to a very, very short 10 days. Particularly the DCV, the domain control validation coming down, is going to make things a lot more secure, because temporarily having your site hacked, the blast radius for that is currently 370 odd days worth of someone being able to spoof your domain with a valid certificate. Well, now that blast radius becomes 10 days for issuing new certs and 47 days in total for any cert they do get issued. So that really does bring the damage right down. So that, like I say, this is being done for very sensible reasons. What this means for any NocillaCastaways listening is that if your website is HTTPS secured and you're doing that manually by once a year going to a certificate authority, paying them for a certificate and then manually installing it on your website, you need to automate that. There are lots of tools available for automating that. The most open sourcey of them is the wonderfully named CertBot, which is from Let's Encrypt. And it initially started life as an agent for the free Let's Encrypt Certificate Authority, but is in fact a completely generic tool that any certificate authority on planet Earth can support because it has a fully public API. And with my work hat on, I in fact use CertBot for a completely different certificate authority, and it works amazingly well. So if you have a secure website that you're manually securing, You have until, well, it's going to start getting annoying in 2027 when you got to do it every 3 months instead of once a year. And it's going to really, really, really get annoying in March of 2029 when it's going to basically become something you have to do every month and a bit. Finally, I want to let you know about a change in Chrome that's probably a whole bunch of nothing, but it may have a side effect you'll notice. So I think it's worth explaining what's going on here. So way back in the early days of the internet, there was no such thing as CSS and JavaScript, and all web pages looked the same, and they developed a useful convention that a browser would give a different color to a link you had already visited. So links you haven't visited are blue, and links you have visited are sort of a purpley color. And that is still how a lot of websites behave today, right? It's not always purple, but basically websites you have visited are shown differently by the browser to websites you haven't visited, and that's the browser changing the look of something based on information stored inside the browser's history to be precise. Now with CSS and JavaScript, web pages can effectively probe the content of your local history file by checking the color of things. So you can use JavaScript to get the CSS properties of a link, and then you can use the JavaScript to say, hey, is that link that I just added into this page for bartsecretwebsite.com, is that link blue or purple? Oh, it's purple. That means that this user, whoever they are, and even though I technically can't see their history file, I know for a fact now they've visited bartsecretlink.com. So that is a leak of information. It's not the world's most catastrophic leak, but, you can probe for a whole bunch of potentially interesting sites. It can be a very useful tool for cyber attackers or for privacy invaders, right? If you want to detect if someone's a fan of astronomy, you could start looking for skyandtelescope.com and a few other links like that, and then you could basically profile people, right? Every time a malicious ad is shown in your browser, it can add in a few more test links and slowly over time bulk up your profile. So after a week of just browsing the web, the website knows everything you do online pretty much by just probing your history like this. Right? It's a real potential issue. But we've done nothing about it for 20 years. But Chrome 136 is fixing it, because what they're doing is Chrome is only going to show links as visited if you did the visit from the website the link is being shown on. So if you only ever search the web on Google, then everything you've clicked to from Google will still show up in purple just like it does now, and you won't notice that anything has happened. But if you sometimes use Google and sometimes use Bing, right now, if a result in Bing points you to a place you've already been via Google, it'll be purple too, because it's one unified history. Well, after this change, if you follow the link in Google and Bing shows you the same link, it will not be shown in purple. You won't realize you've visited it before, because only links visited from Google will show as visited on Google, and only links visited from Bing will show as visited on Bing. So Google can't probe your full history, it can only know where it sent you, and Bing can't probe your full history because it'll only know where it sent you, and ads can't probe anything because they haven't sent you anywhere, so they don't see any history anymore. Like I say, it does fix a real problem, but it has a slight usability impact. A final point that is probably worth more of a discussion than I'm going to give it here, but hey, look, it's 50 minutes into this solo security bits, and I have loads of other interesting content for this show. Meep! Let's go over this one quickly then. Google have rolled out easy end-to-end encryption for Gmail for business users. Right? This is a purely enterprise feature because it requires organizations to run their own key management server. However, there's another caveat here too, by the way. This only works on the web version of Gmail because it leverages the browser to do the encryption and the decryption for the end-to-end encryption. However, this is an extremely clever design with the proper delegation of trust that organizations need, and it's actually real-world ready, unlike the geeky hobbyist PGP option. And while technically speaking S-MIME is world ready, it's such a pain in the backside that almost no one actually uses S-MIME. So this actually really is likely to make it dramatically easier for enterprises and governments and, charities and so on and so forth to add true end-to-end encryption to their Gmail emails, no matter who they email. I think it's kind of cool. If you want the nerdy details, Steve Gibson goes into all the wonderful cryptography in great detail, but in Security Now episode 1020. But I do need to give you a caveat here. Steve is an old-fashioned kind of guy. Steve does not come from or live in the enterprise world. He thinks in terms of single users. That is his view of the world. And so he doesn't understand enterprise context. And in this case, that leads him to wrongly assert that this isn't true end-to-end encryption, because in his mind, the ends have to be specific browsers. Whereas in actual fact, in the enterprise context, the ends are the organizations. And this is provably encrypted between organizations. And that's what it's supposed to do. It does that. It is end-to-end encryption for enterprise users. Right, the for enterprise users bit is the bit Steve doesn't grok, which is why, despite all of his scoffing, no. It really is a viable, true E2E solution. There's nothing to quibble with here. Whew, right. We have no top tips. We have no excellent explainers. We have no interesting insights. We have no just because it's cool. What we do have after all of that is a palette cleanser, which, having just been a little cranky at Steve Gibson, I now get to remind everyone that he's our people. Steve Gibson is completely our wonderful nerdy people. I listen to the show despite quibbling with it because Steve's our people. Anyway, he does a fun thing called Picture of the Week. They're often extremely nerdy. But this week's one is both extremely nerdy and it overlaps with the coding fun we like to have on Programming by Stealth, so I thought it was worth sharing. The caption is, subtle coding choices can land you at the bottom of a canyon. And we see the Roadrunner standing safely at the edge of a cliff as the coyote skids past him, runs off the end of the cliff, and is now doing that thing Wile E. Coyote does, which is hovering in midair before plunging to a funny and strangely not death-inducing drop where he'll make a perfect little imprint of himself in the world, ing it up and look a bit woozy. Anyway, the caption over the Roadrunner is not meep meep, but while, not edge, open curly bracket, run, close curly bracket. Meanwhile, the caption on the silly coyote is do, run, while, not edge. So yeah, while not edge, run, has an out by one error of do, run, while not edge. And that out by one error could be very, very painful to a cartoon coyote. Right, with that, I'm going to draw a line under it. Big, long, detailed show notes at www.podfeet.com. Fun in the Podfeet Slack at podfeet.com/Slack. I'm supposed to have a catchphrase now. I've been talking so long, I've almost forgotten it, but now that I've vamped for a bit, I can tell you to remember to stay patched so you stay secure. That is going to wind things up for this week, but before I go, just a quick little reminder that you can hear more of my Irish accent over at lets-talk.ie, where I host and produce the monthly Let's Talk Apple and Let's Talk Photography shows, giving listeners the 40,000-foot view of the month's Apple news and pontificating on the art and craft of photography. Anyway, I'm glad to say Alison will be back next week. Did you know you can email Alison at alison@podfeet.com anytime you like? If you have a question or a suggestion, just send it on over. Remember, everything good starts with podfeet.com. You can follow her on Mastodon at podfeet.com/Mastodon. If you want to listen to the podcast on YouTube, you can go to podfeet.com/YouTube. If you want to join the conversation, you can join our amazing Slack over at podfeet.com/Slack, where I hang out along with Alison and everyone else. You can support the show at podfeet.com/Patreon with a one-time donation, or podfeet.com/donate with Apple Pay or any credit card, or through podfeet.com/PayPal. If you want to join in the fun of the live show, head over to podfeet.com/live on Sunday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific time and join the friendly and enthusiastic NocillaCastaways. Thanks for listening, and remember, folks, stay subscribed. Thanks for saying subscribed, and stay tuned. That's the wrong outro.